Good morning. This is an uneducated, uninformative take on Rene Descartes' Meditations book. Rene Descartes is very well known as a very crucial and important figure in modern philosophy. Now, I personally have only read Meditations, and from reading this book, I can tell you that I don't believe that. I don't believe that he's as important as a figure in modern philosophy, but that's just my opinion. Descartes is mostly known among people for this quote. You've probably heard it before. If you haven't, you've heard of it before. I think, therefore I am. And I think, therefore I am is a very flexible quote. Right? You can use it to either justify your existence or prove your existence. And I'm going to be talking about how Descartes and why Descartes reaches this conclusion. It's important to note that Descartes is also a mathematician, not only a philosopher. So, why does Descartes say, I think, therefore I am? What does he mean by it? And how does he get there? So Descartes starts off his book Meditations by questioning an objective truth, by asking the question, what can we know for certain? Which seems like a very shallow question, but really, what can you know? What can you tell me objectively is the truth? With 100% certainty. Are you absolutely certain that you are not currently dreaming? Are you absolutely certain that you really are in front of your screen right now watching this video? Are you really certain that you are awake? Are you really certain that you are a being that exists? We can't know that. There's really no way to prove that for sure. And that's what Descartes is trying to do. He's trying to prove that there must be something that is 100% true. So he takes on this thought experiment. He tells himself that nothing that I perceive right now is true. This is all fake. This is all a mirage. This is a dream. So he comes up with a very nice thought experiment, which involves an evil entity. Now, this evil entity, whoever it might be, is deceiving you into believing that what you see is real. It's deceiving you by showing you this visual stimuli, by convincing you that you really are touching something with your hand when you really aren't. And so the logical conclusion that must be is that if the evil entity exists, and if the evil entity is deceiving me, then I must exist in order to be deceived in the first place, which is very logical. It sounds intuitive, but when you think about it, it's such a strong proof for our existence, for your existence, because you are right now thinking about the evil entity, right? You are right now thinking, and therefore you are. Now, a modern kind of example of this is usually the simulation, that we're just living in a simulation, that nothing is true, and we're in a postmodern world, in a kind of dystopia where these lives are being simulated. But in order to be in that simulation in the first place, then you must exist. And therefore, Descartes proves his existence. And it's a very beautiful thing to prove your existence, because even if the evil entity does exist, even if we are in a simulation, even if nothing is real, it remains real and true that I exist. And no matter how things might be, the fact that I exist is some kind of resistance to perhaps the evil entity. However, this is what Descartes talks about in his first meditation, and after he makes this revelation, he goes on to try to prove the existence of God. Now, I myself do believe in the existence of God. However, I don't like how Descartes argues for the existence of God, because in his first meditation, when he's proving existence, he's very ruthless and he's very disciplined with his argument. He sticks to his thought experiment. He sticks to the fact that everything is false, nothing is true, nothing I'm seeing is true. However, in a very human nature, I will concede, Descartes really wants to prove the existence of God. However, he does the argument a disservice by not practicing the same discipline and the same kind of scruple that he does in his first meditation. He's not as ruthless with his argument. He's not as critical of his thinking, right? And I'll show you why in a second. So Descartes comes up with this idea, right, that we as humans, right, here we are. He talks about kind of a scale of perfection, right? So we humans are just as perfect as other humans. I could say that we are a bit more perfect than rocks, for example, just as a rough example. So Descartes claims that we as humans are able to author ideas or to create ideas which are either as perfect as us or less perfect than us. These are all the ideas in our head that we create. We create an idea of the rock because we see the rock, and the rock is less perfect than us, so we can comprehend what the rock is because it is less perfect than us. We comprehend other humans, we see other humans, we imagine other humans, and thus, because humans are as perfect than us, we have the ability to do that. So, that being said, we don't have the ability to create or author ideas that are more perfect than us. And that makes sense, right? Because we can create things that are as perfect than us, but we can't make something that is more perfect than a human being. It just doesn't make sense. We can make robots, we can make a certain kind of machines that have very specific jobs that they might perform better than humans, but that doesn't make them more perfect than humans. Okay? Because we can never create something that is more perfect than us, in Descartes' words. There is an exception to this though. There is one anomaly. In all of us, in all of our minds, we have one idea that is more perfect than us. That because it's more perfect than us, we could not have possibly authored it ourselves. We could not have possibly created this idea ourselves. And that is the idea of God. God is, of course, much more perfect. He is the perfect being, and we have the idea of God in our minds, which stands to reason that there must be someone else who put this idea in our minds, because we couldn't have come up with it ourselves. We are less perfect than God. So, who put that idea into us? Well, it must have come from above. Just like this, God must have instilled this idea into our minds. Now, there's a few things that are a bit shaky about this argument. There's a few plot holes here. First of all, how do we know that the idea of God is not just a trick that is made up by the evil entity, right? How can we claim for 100% certainty that the idea of God is more perfect, okay, is the perfect idea, and thus it couldn't have been created by the evil entity to trick us into thinking that there is a God? And why can't God be the evil entity, right? And the evil entity is the most perfect being, is convincing us of there being a most perfect being, which is God. So, what I'm saying is, in Descartes' experiment, why can't the evil entity be God, but in its evilness, it's deceiving us into thinking that God is all good? Of course, Descartes talks about this idea in his book, and he just chalks it up by saying that because God is all good, he will never deceive us, and because the evil entity implies malice, which implies imperfection, that can't be. Fair enough. When I think about this idea, I like to think about art. How when we draw beings and we draw, say, monsters, we don't really make anything original. What I mean by that is that we take one thing and we kind of extract from it, and we either take it to the extreme or kind of twist it in some way. What do I mean by that? If you want to make a monster that's derived from an elephant, you can give it 17 trunks, you can give it 100 legs, you can give it 13 eyes or whatever it is, but it would still be derived from an elephant which existed, and we know it existed, and we saw it, and we were inspired by it. We didn't really make anything new ourselves. We didn't create an organ which never existed in any other kind of animal that we see in real life. And that, in my opinion, is original thought. There is no original thought. There is no original kind of creation that we can make ourselves. So, if we follow that principle, and it kind of lines up with what Descartes is saying here, right? So if we follow that principle, we can say that the idea of God is taken, and I'm not saying that it is, it could be taken from an idea of an imperfect human. What do I mean by that? Take a very, very flawed human who is incapable of any good and is capable only of doing bad. He's very evil. He's just this kind of being of malice. It goes without saying that anyone could just imagine at some point, imagine in your head, if this human had all of his traits reversed, just the opposite end of it, right? Take the opposite end of it. So everything that's bad turns into good. His imperfections turn into perfections, right? And thus you've created the idea of God. I don't think that's how the idea of God came to be, but I think it's something that's a bit instinctive, a bit like intuitive, right? You can make that deduction yourself. So it's not true that I can't come up with the idea of God myself, right? Because I can just take someone who is very human, who has all these flaws, and that I can imagine them without flaws. And I can say that without these flaws, he'd be perfect, he'd be all good, he'd be all powerful, he'd be supreme, he'd be all of these traits that we attribute to God. So that's why I don't subscribe to this idea. Because I feel like the idea of perfection is just the opposite of imperfection. And if we can imagine imperfection, then why can't we just imagine the direct opposite of it, which is perfection, right? So yeah, this is the main flaw, in my opinion, of Descartes' argument. He's just saying this, and he's never really diving deep into it. He's never really criticizing his own idea like he did in the first meditation when he was talking about I think, I therefore I am. And that's my problem with Descartes. That's the problem I have with him. That's like where the beef comes from. So, there are also other things about this argument, other implications about this argument. Take, for example, intermediary beings. Intermediary beings which are more perfect than us, but less perfect than God. Could not these beings exist? Could not these beings exist because I'm thinking of them? There's an idea of them in my head. I can tell that the idea is more perfect than me because they are more perfect than me, but they're less perfect than God. So are they the ones who imparted that idea into my mind? And if so, does that mean they exist? Does that mean that there's a multitude of beings between us and God who I can imagine as having a higher perfection than me, but a lower perfection than God? Does that mean that they exist automatically just because I can think of them? That doesn't make sense. Then, if so, then I could just imagine something and it would be real because I can imagine it. That's absolutely not true. You can't just claim that, right? So that's Descartes' first argument on the existence of God. The second argument, which is not really it's not the main argument, it's kind of something he says on a side note, in my opinion. The idea of God, as we all know, we will all agree, whether you think God exists or not, you will agree that God is perfect. Right? Perfection is kind of a bundle of attributes. If God is perfect, that means that He is all-powerful. Right? If God is perfect, that means He is all good. If God is perfect, it means He is supreme. If God is perfect, it means He will never deceive you. If God is perfect, that means He exists. Because if you're the perfect being, then you must exist, right? Because if you don't exist, then you're not really perfect, are you? Because you can't exist. And that goes against perfection, which goes against the entire idea of God in and of itself. And thus, if God doesn't exist, then God isn't perfect. And that can't be, because we all agree that God is perfect. Whether or not He exists, He is perfect. So it's kind of almost a linguistic contradiction here. And I think this is a very kind of shallow argument, right? Of course, a lot of philosophers after him, both theists and atheists, will go on to argue against this point and prove how it's ridiculous, really. This is not how you argue for the existence of God. And like I said in the beginning, it's a disservice to people who try to prove the existence of God. I don't believe that Descartes does this out of any sort of malicious intent. I think that Descartes, after he makes this revelation of what he thinks is the proof to the existence of God, he goes on to very beautifully describe God, or at least describe the attributes that we give to God. And it's very beautiful to see him in kind of bliss. You can tell through the pages that he's extremely happy with the fact that he could prove the existence of God, and he's extremely sorry as well that that he kind of doubted the existence of God, right? Later on, he tries to talk about diseases, right? He says, if God is all good, then why do we, when we get sick, why do we sometimes do things that might make us more sick, right? For example, you have a sore throat, and you kind of instinctively drink something that makes your throat worse. So Descartes is questioning, why do we do that? If God is all good, then why are we being deceived, right? Why are our minds deceiving us? Because he says that our minds, though they are nowhere near as perfect as God, they must have been derived from perfection, right? That we are a part of the perfection that God is. And thus, we should not be able to make these mistakes. In my opinion here, Descartes kind of misses one very important thing. The fact that just because God is all good does not mean that nothing bad will ever befall you. This argument is used a lot by many atheists, and in my opinion, it's a ridiculous argument, right? And the argument goes like this. It's if God is all good, then how can any evil happen on earth? And that's ridiculous, because if there's no evil on earth, how do you know what's good? Right? If there's no evil to compare it to, then how do you know that this is good and this is evil? Because good and evil are, by definition, relative to each other. Good is not evil and evil is not good. So God is all good. However, there must be evil in this world. We can't just live in an all good world, and then, because we wouldn't be calling it an all good world. Of course, there is heaven, there is hell, right? There is good and there is evil. There has to be some kind of divide. There has to be some kind of juxtaposition. You know, you can't have two good things, because good and evil, like I said, are relative to each other. So yeah, these are the arguments that were employed by Descartes in his meditations. Of course, this does not cover the entire book. The book is a very short read. I would recommend it to everyone, honestly. It's very beautiful. It's very elegant. And Descartes, although he makes, in my opinion, not the strongest arguments for the existence of God, he still does employ rigorous discipline. In his first meditation, when he talks about the existence of himself, he says a lot of beautiful things about the mind and about the existence of God, and so on and so forth. It's just the one point that I really wish he conceded to was that just because God is all good does not mean that no evil may befall us. And so yeah, thanks for watching. The next video will be on the Metamorphosis and other stories by Franz Kafka.